Pain, you want a breakthrough, but you're still holding on to baggage. You want a miracle, but you're still clutching the very things that are blocking your blessing. Stop saying, pain, Tom. Stop saying, I don't have resources. Start saying, God, show me what's in my hand. Because when Moses said he had nothing, God showed him the staff. Pain, your miracle is always hidden in what you already have. Your breakthrough isn't waiting for new opportunities. It's waiting for you to delete the things that delay your destiny. Pain, when you release the old, you make room for the new. Because transformation doesn't start when something new comes in. Pain, it starts when something old finally leaves. The need for approval is one of the most subtle but most dangerous enemies of destiny. It hides behind good manners, politeness. Pain, the desire to be liked, but in truth it is a silent killer of purpose. Pain. So many people delay their divine assignment because they are waiting for permission from people who were never called to understand them. Pain, they spend their lives auditioning for acceptance, trying to be good enough for a world they'll never fully approve of what God has placed inside them. But listen carefully. If you are going to walk in the fullness of what God created you to be, you must delete the need for approval. Pain, when you depend on people's applause to move forward, you have already given them the power to stop you. Every great calling attracts misunderstanding. Pain, every big vision will confuse small minds. There will always be people who can't see what God told you in private. Some will question your motives. Pain, others will doubt your capability, and a few will even mock your faith. But you cannot let that stop you. Pain, you must remember that obedience to God will always look like rebellion to those who worship comfort. People might say you've changed, and that's fine. Pain, because transformation always looks like betrayal to those who refuse to grow. When David faced Goliath, he didn't wait for approval from his brothers. But they told he was arrogant, that he was unqualified. But he understood something powerful. When you are anointed for a battle, Pain, you don't need to be approved by people who never picked up a stone. David's confidence wasn't in himself, it was in the God who called him. That's the key. Once you know who sent you, you stop worrying about who supports you. The one who called you is the one who will carry you. The opinions cannot cancel what heaven has decreed. Approval addiction is like chasing a moving target. The moment you get one person to like you, Pain, someone else disapproves. The moment you please your friends, your family complains. The moment your followers cheer, your critics shout louder. Pain, it's an endless cycle that keeps you enslaved to people's reactions instead of anchored in your conviction. Pain, you become so busy managing perception that you stop walking in purpose. You trade authenticity for acceptance. And the tragedy is this. Pain, you cannot lead people while being led by their opinions. You can either live chosen or live liked, but you can't live both. Pain, God's approval is not measured by how many people agree with you. Often his path for you will lead you into seasons of solitude where you have no applause, no recognition, pain, and no validation. Only faith. It's not punishment, that's preparation. Because before God elevates you publicly, he tests your obedience privately. Pain, if you can obey without affirmation, he can trust you with acceleration. When you don't need the crowd's women, you can finally hear God's well done. You see, Pain, the desire for approval often comes from a deep fear of rejection. Somewhere along the way, someone made you believe you weren't enough, not smart enough. Pain, not talented enough, not worthy enough. And since that moment, you've been performing for approval instead of walking in purpose. But here's the truth. Pain, you were approved before you ever performed. You were accepted, but you achieved. God validated you before anyone ever evaluated you. Pain, you don't have to prove your worth to anyone when your Creator already declared you worthy. When you delete the need for approval, Pain, you stop chasing people who were never assigned to your destiny. You stop explaining your purpose to those who can't comprehend it. Pain, you stop apologizing for being who God designed you to be. There's freedom in not needing everyone to understand you, because when you no longer need their permission, Pain, your focus stoppables, your confidence rises, and your energy aligns with your assignment. Look at Jesus. Even he was misunderstood. Pain, the very people came to save, accused him of blasphemy. The religious leaders hated him. The crowd that shouted, Hosanna, one week shouted, crucify him, the next. Pain, but didn't let rejection derail his mission. He knew his purpose wasn't dependent on people's praise. He walked in divine approval. And because he did, he completed his assignment in full authority. Your calling will require the same courage. There will be times you walk alone, times you will be criticized. Pain, times you'll have to believe in yourself when no one else does. But in those moments, remind yourself, I am approved by God. My worth is not on trial. Pain, my destiny doesn't need a vote. Once heaven says highs, no human no, can stop it. So delete the need for approval, not because people don't matter. Pain because purpose matters more. Love people, serve them, bless them, but never become a slave to their opinions. Pain because the same voices that cheer you today can turn on you tomorrow. But God's approval is eternal. His quiet echoes beyond every ears know the world throws at you. Pain when you finally live from that truth, your breakthrough begins. Pain because your next level is not waiting for more people to like you. It's waiting for you to finally believe that you don't need them to. Pain. The fear of failure is one of the most common barriers that keeps people from walking into the life God designed for them. Pain, it doesn't always show up as loud panic or visible hesitation. Sometimes it hides quietly behind perfectionism, procrastination, or the need to always have the right plan before making a move. But at its core, fear of failure is the voice that says, what if it doesn't work? While God is saying, what if it does? You see, fear of failure is not just about being scared to fall. It's about being unwilling to grow. Because failure is not the opposite of success. Pain's part of success. It's the process that produces wisdom, humility, and strength when you're walking in purpose. Pain, you have to understand that God doesn't measure your success by your perfection. He measures it by your progression. Pain, the greatest achievers in Scripture and in history all had one thing in common. They failed forward. Moses failed when he struck the rock in anger. Peter failed when he denied Jesus 3 times. David failed when he fell into temptation. But their stories didn't end in failure. The failures became the soil where faith grew stronger. Failure never disqualifies you unless you quit. Pain. It's not the falling that ruins you, it's refusing to rise again. When you fear failure, you unconsciously tell God that your mistakes are bigger than His mercy. Pain. You begin to believe that one wrong move can erase His plan for your life. But that's not how grace works. God's purpose is not fragile. He knew every detour and every mistake and every breakdown before He ever called you. And He still said, you're chosen. That means your failure doesn't surprise Him. It prepares you. Pain. Every time you fall and gack up, you prove to the enemy that your faith is stronger than your fear. The fear of failure often comes from how we've been conditioned. Pain. Maybe you grew up being punished for mistakes, embarrassed for getting things wrong, or mocked when you tried and didn't succeed. Over time, you learn to equate failure with shame. So now instead of trying and learning, you hesitate and hide. But hear this. God never called you to perfection. Pain, He called you to obedience. And obedience sometimes leads you through uncomfortable lessons. If you're waiting until you're sure you won't fail, you'll wait forever. Pain, you cannot walk on water if you never step out of the boat. Peter didn't have a perfect plan when he stepped onto the sea. He just had faith. Pain, he walked not because the water was stable, but because his trust was. Yes, he began to sink, but he also experienced something the other disciples never did. Pain, the power of walking with Jesus in the impossible. That's what happens when you stop fearing failure. You gain experiences that people who play it safe will never know. Pain, you gain testimony, not theory. You gain authority, not assumption. The only people who never fail are the ones who never try. The enemy loves to use fear to paralyze potential. He whispers, don't start that business, what if it fails? Don't share that idea, people might laugh. Don't step out in faith, you might fall. But what the devil doesn't tell you is that not trying is the greatest failure of all. Pain, every time you choose safety over faith, you lose a piece of your purpose. Every time you hide your gift because you're scared of rejection, pain, you rob the world of what God placed inside you. Failure is not fatal, fear is. Because fear makes you bury what you were meant to build. Pain, think about the parable of the talents. The servant who had his talent didn't do it because he was lazy. He did it because afraid. He said, I was afraid. Pain, so if you gave me, and what happened? The master didn't commend him for playing it safe. He called him unfaithful. Why? Because faithfulness is not about avoiding risk. It's about using what you've been given, even when you're unsure of the outcome. God rewards movement, not maintenance. Pain, every great testimony begins a moment of risk. Abraham left his home without knowing where he was going. Esther risked her life to save her people. Pain, the disciples left their nets to follow a man the world didn't yet understand. Faith always feels like a gamble to the flesh, but it's a guaranteed victory to the spirit. Pain, difference between those who walk in destiny and those who just dream about it is that the former were willing to fail and learn. When you shift your mindset, pain, failure stops being an enemy and becomes an educator. It teaches you what doesn't work so you can find what does. Pain humbles you enough to depend on God instead of your own strength. It strips away pride, ego, and the illusion of control. Pain, every successful person you admire has a list of failures behind their achievements, but they didn't stop at the fall. They got back up with more wisdom, more resilience, pain, more grace. So delete the fear of failure. Stop worshiping the idea of getting everything right on the first try. Pain, stop letting the opinions of people who never built anything keep you from building what God told you to build. The truth is, you will fail sometimes, but you will also learn, recover, and rise. Every stumble is a setup for strength. Every mistake is a message in disguise. Pain, every delay is part of your divine development. You were not created to tiptoe through life, scared of falling. You were created to walk in faith. Pain, knowing that even if you fall, God's hand will lift you higher than before. The fear of failure will always whisper, "What if?" But faith will always shout, "Even if." And when you learn to live from that place, even if I fall, even if they laugh, eat if it hurts, you unlock a level of freedom that makes you unstoppable. Because the truth is, God can't use people who never move. He uses those who dare to step, stumble, and still stand again. Comparison is one of the most silent destroyers of destiny. Pain, it doesn't always come with jealousy or bitterness. Sometimes it disguises itself as admiration, inspiration, or harmless observation. Pain, you look at someone else's success and start to question your own progress. Pain, you scroll through highlight reels of other people's lives and wonder why your story isn't unfolding the same way. But comparison is a thief. It robs you of gratitude, creativity, peace, and focus. It makes you blind to what God is doing in your life because you're too busy watching what He's doing in someone else's. Pain, when you compare your journey to another person's, you're essentially telling God, "I don't trust the pace you set for me." You forget that every destiny has its own divine timeline. The seed planted today does not bloom tomorrow. Pain, and just because someone else's garden is blossoming doesn't mean yours isn't growing. Some flowers bloom in spring, others wait for summer. Pain, the delay isn't denial, it's design. God custom tailored your process to prepare you for your promise. If you bloom too soon, pain, you might not have the roots to sustain the fruit. The danger of comparison is that it makes you doubt your assignment. Pain, you start measuring your value by other people's visibility. You think because they have a platform, you don't have purpose. But purpose isn't proven by followers or titles or applause. Purpose is proven by obedience. Some people are called to stages, others are called to sanctuaries, families, or communities. Pain, and both are equally important in God's kingdom. David was anointed in private long before he was celebrated in public. Don't despise your hidden season. Pain, that's where God shapes your character before He shows your crown. When you compare, you create competition where God never intended it. Pain, you waste energy trying to match someone else's calling instead of mastering your own. And the truth is, pain, you can't walk confidently in your assignment while watching someone else's path. You can't focus on your lane and theirs at the same time. A comparison causes spiritual collisions because it pulls your attention from what you're supposed to build. The more you focus on others, the more you drift from yourself. Pain, think about Peter and John in the Bible. After Jesus restored Peter and told him to feed his sheep, Peter immediately looked at John and said, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus replied, "What is that to you? You follow me." That statement is a reminder for all of us. It's as if Jesus was saying, "Peter, pain, stop worrying about someone else's instructions and obey yours." God is saying the same to many of us today. Stop asking about their journey. Focus on your own obedience. You cannot fulfill your mission while fixating on someone else's mission. Pain, comparison also twists your perception of self-worth. It makes you feel behind when you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You see others achieving milestones, success, marriage, money, influence, and think you're late. But there's no lateness in God's calendar. Pain, you are on schedule according to divine timing. God isn't just preparing the blessing, He's preparing you for the blessing. And sometimes the preparation takes longer because your calling carries greater weight. When you compare, pain, you forget that everyone's journey includes struggles you don't see. You admire their destination but overlook their process. You see the glory but not the grind. Pain, the success but not the sacrifice. Many of the people you envy once envied someone else. Everyone has a season of sowing that nobody celebrates. Pain, that's why comparison is foolish. You're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Comparison also breeds either pride or insecurity. Both are toxic. If you feel superior, you fall into pride. If you feel inferior, you fall into self-doubt. Either way, you lose balance. The only comparison that builds you is comparing you are today to who you were yesterday. Growth is personal. Progress is private. Pain, the only person you should compete with is the version of you that settled last season. When you stop comparing, you free yourself to create. You begin to appreciate what God placed in your hands. You start innovating, not imitating. Pain, your creative flows because you're no longer trying to fit into someone else's mold. God didn't design you to be a copy. He made you an original. Your sound, your gift, pain, your journey, they're unique for a reason. When you embrace your uniqueness, you give others permission to embrace theirs too. Gratitude is the antidote to comparison. Pain, when you start thanking God for where you are, you stop resenting where you aren't. You begin to see that what you already have is more than enough to build something great. Pain, every step, every delay, every hardship is working together for your good. You might not be where you want to be yet, but you're not where you used to be. Pain, that's progress worth celebrating. The next time comparison tries to creep in, remind yourself, your story is not my standard. God writes unique scripts for each of his children. Some stories are dramatic, others quiet. Some rise quietly, others slowly. But every story has value because every story reveals a different side of his glory. So delete comparison, not because you're insecure, pain, but because it's beneath your purpose. You can't run your race looking sideways. You can't build your blessing with your eyes on someone else's blueprint. Look straight and focused. Celebrate others, but stay committed to your own calling. Because when you stop comparing, you start becoming. And when you start becoming, pain, you finally unlock the version of you that God intended all along. The one who knows they're enough right now, right where they are. Pain, excuses are the silent assassins of destiny. They sound reasonable, they sound logical, but they quietly destroy every great thing God wants to do through your life. Pain, an excuse is simply a story you tell yourself to justify why you're not walking in obedience. Pain, it's a mental cushion that keeps you comfortable when you should be courageous. Pain, or who has ever done something great had every reason to make excuses, but they chose execution instead. Because while excuses feel safe, they keep you stuck. Excuses give you permission to stay in the same place and call it patience, when in reality it's hesitation. When God gives you a vision, pain, he's not asking whether you think you're ready. He's asking whether you're willing. Many people pray for a breakthrough, pain, but when the opportunity comes wrapped in effort, they hide behind excuses. I don't have enough time. I have enough money. I'm not educated enough. It's not the right season. These are not facts. Pain, these are fears disguised as logic. Excuses will always sound wise to the person who's afraid to act. But the truth is you will never have perfect timing, pain, per commissions, or perfect confidence. You must move even when it's messy. Moses tried to make excuses when God called him. He said, Lord, I can't speak well. Pain, I'm not the right person. But God responded, who made your mouth? In other words, God was saying, pain, don't tell me what you can't do. I already equipped you for what I called you to do. The same applies to you. And whatever excuse you've been using to delay obedience, God has already provided the answer before you even ask the question. You think you lack resources, but God says you have something in your hand. You think you lack skill, but God says his strength is made perfect in your weakness. You think you lack opportunity, but God says your faith will open the doors that fear keeps shut. Excuses are deceptive because they often sound responsible. Pain, you convince yourself that you're waiting for the right time, when really you're just afraid of rejection or failure. Pain, you call it planning, but you're actually procrastinating. You call it caution, but it's really unbelief. Pain, excuses make you feel wise while robbing you of progress. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you with reasons why you can't move forward. As long as you keep rationalizing your stagnation, you'll never step into transformation. God doesn't bless excuses, he blesses execution. Pain, the Red Sea didn't part until Moses raised his staff. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until the people marched. Pain, the miracle of the loaves and fishes didn't happen until someone brought what they already had. Pain, miracles don't manifest where excuses live. They manifest where obedience walks. You can pray all day for change, but until you take a step. Pain, your prayer stays potential instead of becoming power. Faith without works is dead, not because faith isn't real. Pain, because it never leaves the realm of belief to enter the realm of action. Every excuse you make strengthens your limitation. Every time you say, I can't, you give that belief more power. But the moment you say, with God, you activate divine assistance. Pain, the difference between the person who moves forward and the one who stays stuck isn't ability. It's accountability. One owns their destiny. Pain, the other blames their circumstances. The truth is, if you're waiting for things to change before you move, you'll wait forever. God changes things as you move. Pain, excuses often come from fear of responsibility. When you take action, you remove the option to blame anyone else. You can't hide behind what someone did or didn't do. But maturity means realizing that your future is your responsibility. You may not be to blame for your past, but you are responsible for your potential. God gave you gifts, pain not guarantees. It's up to you to develop what He deposited in you. Every excuse you keep is a blessing you delay. Even the smallest step forward can break the spirit of excuse. May start with what you have. Start where you are. Stop waiting for the conditions to be perfect. The widow in Scripture didn't have much, just a little oil and a little faith. But that was enough for a miracle. Paying you're not enough becomes more than enough when you give it to God. He multiplies motion, not excuses. You have to understand that excuses are not harmless words. They are agreements with limitation. When you keep repeating them, you train your mind to accept smallness. You begin to normalize mediocrity and label it as contentment. Paying, but real contentment is peace within progress, not peace within paralysis. God doesn't want you to be comfortable, He wants you to be complete. Pain, that means moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. There will never be a convenient moment to fulfill your calling. You'll always have obstacles, critics, uncertainties, but the more you move, the more God reveals. He doesn't show you the whole staircase, just the next step. And as you take that step, and doors open, opportunities appear, and confidence grows. The breakthrough you're praying for might already be waiting on the other side of your last excuse. Pain. So delete every excuse that has kept it can't. Delete the not now. Delete the maybe later. Replace them with declarations of faith. I can. God will help me. Because once you stop excusing your limitations, you start exposing your potential. Pain. When you stop waiting for permission to move, heaven starts moving with you. Your next level isn't waiting on more signs. It's waiting on more steps. Pain. The moment you delete your excuses, your destiny begins to download. Pain. Toxic relationships are one of the greatest weights that keep people from rising into the destiny God prepared for them. They don't always look dangerous, in fact. They often come disguised as loyalty, friendship, or love. But anything or anyone that consistently drains your peace, distracts your focus, pain, or diminishes your faith is toxic to your purpose. You can't step into a new season while staying connected to people who only belong to your old one. Pain. Sometimes the greatest act of faith isn't saying yes, it's saying goodbye. The truth is not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Pain. God assigns some people to your journey for a reason, others for a season, and only a few for a lifetime. Pain. The problem is that many of us try to temporary connection to the permanent commitments. We hold on to people out of guilt, obligation, or history. Pain. Even when their presence no longer aligns with our progress. We call it being loyal, but what it really becomes is bondage. Pain. Loyalty becomes toxic when it keeps you attached to what God has already told you to release. Look at Abram and Lot. When God called Abraham to a new land, Lot came along. Pain. For a while, things seemed conflict broke out between their herdsmen. Their paths were no longer compatible. Abraham loved Lot, pain, but he understood a divine principle. Elevation requires separation. As soon as Abram and Lot parted ways, God spoke again. Pain. The next level of revelation didn't come until the wrong connection was removed. That's how it often works. Some blessings will manifest until you let go of the people who block them. Toxic relationships don't always mean bad people, and sometimes they simply mean misaligned people. Two good individuals can become toxic together if their values, direction, or calling no longer agree. If you're trying to grow and their content staying the same, tension will always exist. And if you spend all your energy trying to pull them up, you'll eventually be pulled down. You can't carry someone who refuses to climb. You can love them from a distance without losing compassion. Boundaries are not betrayal. Pain, they're protection for your peace. They're also relationships built on manipulation, where one person constantly takes, criticizes, or controls. They make you feel guilty for growing, ashamed for succeeding, and afraid of being authentic. That's not love, that's bondage. True connection celebrates your calling. Toxic connection competes with it. When it begins to elevate you, pay attention to who claps and who complains. Not everyone will celebrate your breakthrough. Pain, because your growth exposes their stagnation. Some people loved you more when you were broken, because it made them feel comfortable. But when you start healing, pain, they feel convicted. Don't shrink yourself to keep them comfortable. God never designed you to be surrounded people who kill your confidence and question your worth. Proverbs says, bad company corrupts good character. That's not just about morality, it's about mindset. The wrong voices can contaminate your vision. Pain, you become like the people you spend time with. If you walk with fearful people, you start to fear. If you walk with complainers, you start to complain. Pib, if you walk with faith-filled, purpose-driven people, you begin to think bigger, pray bolder, and move faster. Pay, relationships either multiply your momentum or magnify your mediocrity. Choose wisely. Many people stay in toxic relationships because of fear. Fear of being alone, but fear of confrontation, fear of what others will think. You have to understand that isolation can sometimes be divine. God will separate you to strengthen you. Pain, it's not rejection, it's redirection. Some people were only meant to be scaffolding in your life, useful for building but temporary. Once the structure is complete, pain, the scaffolding must come down. Holding on past their purpose only causes damage. It's painful to walk away from someone you care about, but peace is always worth the price. Pain, God cannot fill hands that are still clinging to what He asked you to release. When you hold on to dead relationships, you block new connections designed to bless you. Pain, sometimes the reason you haven't met your destiny helpers is because your circle is too full of destiny hindrances. You have to make space for what's next. Pain, when you begin to delete toxic relationships, expect resistance. The moment you decide to grow, people who benefited from your stagnation will call you selfish. Pain, they'll say you've changed, and they're right. You're no longer available for the same conversations, the same chaos, the same complacency. Pain, growth demands new environments. You don't owe anyone access to you if their presence costs you your peace. Forgive those who hurt you, but don't keep reopening the door. Forgiveness heals you, boundaries protect you. Love people, but don't confuse love with permission to abuse your energy. Jesus loved Judas, but He didn't stop him from leaving. He knew the betrayal was part of the plan. Sometimes separation is the setup for elevation. If you want your breakthrough, pain, you have to be bold enough to evaluate your circle. Ask yourself, do they feed my faith or fuel my fear? Do they challenge me to grow or cheer for my excuses? Pain, do they bring clarity or confusion? The people you surround yourself with determine how far you'll go. You can't fly with anchors tied to your feet. Pain, so delete every connection that poisons your peace, clouds your purpose, or cripples your confidence. Pain, it doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you start loving yourself enough to protect what God is building in you. Because when you finally release what's toxic, the God releases what's divine. The right people will recognize your light, not resent it. And when you walk with the right circle, pain, you won't have to fight for peace. You'll live in it. Negative self-talk is one of the most subtle and destructive enemies of destiny. Pain doesn't come from outside voices. It comes from the inner whisper that tells you you're not enough. It's that constant pain, quiet critic in your mind that keep playing your mistakes, reminding your failure, your failures, and dotting your abilities. You can escape the opinions of people, pain, but you can't escape the voice inside you unless you transform it. You see, breakthrough doesn't begin when your situation changes. Pain, it begins when your self-conversation does, because the truth is you can't speak defeat and expect to live in victory. Every word you speak, even in your own head, shapes your reality. The Bible says, pain, life and death are in the power of the tongue, and that includes the tongue that speaks silently in your thoughts. Pain, when you constantly tell yourself you can't do something, your mind will find reasons to prove you right. But when you tell yourself you can, pain, your spirit starts searching for ways to make it happen. What you repeatedly declare becomes what you eventually believe, and what you believe determines what you achieve. Pain, you don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. So if your inner dialogue is filled with fear, doubt, and limitation, your life will reflect that same pattern. Negative self-talk often starts early, from experiences, environments, or people who planted seeds of insecurity. Maybe someone told you that you weren't smart enough, strong enough, or worthy enough. And now, without realizing it, you've become the echo of their voice. Pain, you've internalized their rejection and turned it into self-protection. But protection becomes a prison when it keeps you from trying again. Pain, God didn't create you to repeat the lies of others. He created you to reflect His truth. The moment you start agreeing with God's word instead of your wounds, pain, your identity shifts and your destiny unfolds. The words you say to yourself in private are more powerful than the words you say to others in public. You can post affirmations, pain, quote scripture, and shout praises, but if your inner talk is poison, your progress will be paralyzed. It's not enough to look confident. You have to think confident. Pain, you can't pray for abundance and secretly believe you're unworthy of it. You can't ask for opportunities while telling yourself you're not qualified. Faith and fear can't share the same mental space. One has to go. When you talk down to yourself, you're not just hurting your confidence. You're insulting your Creator. Because when you say, I'm not enough, you're saying that God made a mistake when He made you. But God doesn't make mistakes. He makes miracles. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, crafted intentionally with gifts that nobody else has. Stop letting negative self-talk convince you otherwise. Pain. Start aligning your language heaven's declaration. Heaven says you are chosen, you are capable, you are victorious. You are more than a conqueror. At the moment you start speaking that truth, everything around you begins to align with it. Now, changing your self-talk doesn't happen overnight. Pain. It's a process of renewing your mind, one thought at a time. You have to catch yourself when that old voice shows up, the one that says, "Pain, you always mess things up," or "You're not smart enough for that." Pause and replace it. Don't argue with it, override it. Say, "I used to believe that. Pain, but I know better now. I am growing, I am improving, and I am equipped for this." Every time you replace a lie with truth, you rewire your thinking and reclaim your power. Pain. The enemy wants to keep you in a cycle of self-doubt, because he knows if you ever believe what God says about you, you'll become unstoppable. Think about Moses. He told God he couldn't lead because he wasn't a good speaker. Gideon called himself the weakest in his tribe. Jeremiah said he was too young. Pain. All of them had negative self-talk, but God didn't agree with any of it. God didn't see what they weren't. He saw what he placed within them. And that's the same with you. God already equipped you with what you need, but you have to stop arguing for your limitations. Every time you say, "I can't," heaven goes silent because you're rejecting what's already been released to you. The promises of God require agreement. Can stop using your mouth to cancel what God has called complete. Your mind is a battlefield, and your words are your weapons. Pain. If you don't learn to take control of your inner dialogue, your destiny will be hijacked by doubt. Pain. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you. He just has to convince you to destroy yourself with your own words. But today you can flip the script. Pain. Start declaring life where you used to declare limitation. Speak abundance over your finances, healing over your body, clarity of your mind. When you change the words, you change the atmosphere. When you change the atmosphere, you change the outcome. There's a reason affirmations, prayer, paying, and gratitude work. They retrain your spirit. Expect goodness instead of failure. So from this day forward, make a decision. No more negative self-talk. Pain. You will no longer speak your pain. You will speak as your purpose. You will no longer rehearse your fears. You will release your faith. Pain. Because your mouth can either magnify your misery or manifest your miracle. Choose wisely. Pain. The breakthrough you've been waiting for isn't hidden in some external opportunity. It's hidden in your internal agreement. Pain. As soon as you start talking to yourself like the child you truly are, you'll rise to the level he designed you for. Silence the inner critic, amplify the inner coach. Pain. And speak to yourself the way heaven speaks about you. Your words create your world, so make sure the world building is one you're proud to live in. Laziness is one of the greatest thieves of destiny. It doesn't always look like lying on the couch doing nothing. Sometimes it hides behind procrastination, perfectionism, pain, or endless planning without execution. You can have faith, vision, and prayer, but if you don't move, nothing changes. God gives the promise, you have to take the steps. Pain. Faith without works is dead, and prayer without performance is powerless. You can't just ask for miracles, you have to create the environment where miracles can manifest. Pain. Laziness keeps you waiting for what you should be working toward. Many people pray for God to open doors but never walk toward them. And they want blessings to fall from heaven while ignoring the opportunities already around them. Laziness whispers, "I'll do it tomorrow," but destiny answers, "Pain, only have today." Every delay steals a portion of your purpose. The longer you wait to act, the heavier fear becomes, and the harder it gets to move. Pain. Success doesn't happen by accident. It's the product of consistent action fueled by faith. If you're waiting for the perfect time, you'll wait forever. The perfect time is the moment you decide to start. God doesn't bless potential, He progress. You can have all the dreams in the world, pain, but dreams without discipline die and delay. The enemy doesn't have to destroy your dream. He just has to keep you comfortable enough to never chase it. Pain. Laziness is comfort's best friend, convinces you that you can stay where you are and still reach where you're called to be. But the truth is, pain. Movement activates miracles. Every time you take a step, even a small one, heaven moves with you. Pain. God can't steer a parked car. You have to be in motion for direction to make sense. Look at the parable of the talents. The master gave one servant 5 talents, and another 2, and another 1. The one's work multiplied. The one who buried his talent lost everything. He didn't lose it because he was evil. He lost it because he was idle. He was afraid to fail, so he didn't try. But in the kingdom, doing nothing is never neutral. It's costly. When you refuse to move, Pain, you reject the very reason God gave you gifts. The reward always follows responsibility. If you don't use what you have, you'll lose what you've been given. Pain, laziness often disguises itself as waiting on God, but in truth, God is waiting on you. You don't need another confirmation, you need commitment. Pain, you don't need another sign, you need strategy. The harvest doesn't come to those who pray for rain, it comes to those who prepare the field. Work is not a curse, it's a covenant. God gave Adam a job before he gave him a garden. Work was designed to activate purpose, not to exhaust it. Pain, when you work diligently toward what God called you to do, you're not just hustling, you're honoring him. But laziness doesn't just affect your productivity. Pain poisons your perspective. When you don't move, you start to justify your stagnation. You convince yourself that others are just lucky, that circumstances are unfair. Pain, or that God has forgotten you. In reality, it's not that life has refused to give you opportunities. It's that you've refused to seize them. Pain, hard work won't always give instant results, but it always gives eventual rewards. Every seed you plant in faith will produce fruit in time, but not if you never plant it. Pain, waiting for results without sowing effort is spiritual negligence. Some people think they lack motivation, but what they really lack is motion. Pain, motivation doesn't come before movement, it comes after it. When you start doing the work, momentum builds, clarity comes, and confidence grows. But God designed effort to be energizing. The reason laziness feels heavy because it disconnects you from your creative purpose. You were created to build, to grow. Pain, to expand. Idleness suffocates your divine design. The more you delay, the duller your spirit becomes. But the moment you decide to act, passion reignites. Laziness doesn't mean restlessness is bad. Rest is holy, but restlessness are not the same thing. Rest stores, laziness rots. Rest is recovery after obedience. Pain, laziness is avoidance before obedience. Even God rested, but only after creation was complete. You earn your rest by honoring your work. Pain, many want the results of diligence but live with the habits of delay. You can't ask for increase and operate with indifference. Pain, every great person you admire today got the not because they were lucky, but because they were willing to do what others refused to do. The truth is, pain breakthrough doesn't just require belief, it requires building. You can't pray for God to enlarge your territory while refusing to till your soil. Pain, you can't ask for elevation while sitting in hesitation. You can't demand abundance while living in avoidance. God honors the hands that move with faith. And every successful person in Scripture, Joseph, David, Ruth, Esther, Paul, had one thing in common: they did the work. They didn't wait for everything to make sense. They obeyed, they moved, they acted. And because of that, God multiplied their effort. So if you're serious about your breakthrough, you have to delete laziness immediately. Replace it with discipline, with action, with consistency. Wake up early. Plan your day. Stop talking about what you're going to do and start doing it. Pain. Every day you delay is a day your destiny waits. Don't let comfort cost you your calling. There's greatness inside you that will only come alive when you move. Pain, your effort is the evidence of your faith. Your diligence is the demonstration of your belief. So get up, get moving, pain, and give God something to bless, because He's ready to multiply your work, but He can't multiply what you won't start. And unforgiveness is one of the most powerful prisons a person can live in, not because it locks others out, but because it locks you in. Pain. It is the silent weight that doubts your progress, like joy, and poisons your spirit. You can't walk into your destiny while dragging chains from your history. And yet, so many people carry anger, resentment, and bitterness, believing they are punishing the ones who hurt them, when in reality, they're only punishing themselves. And forgiveness doesn't excuse what happened, it releases you from being held hostage by it. You see, pain is a part of life, but bondage is a choice. Everyone gets hurt, betrayed, rejected, disappointed, but not everyone chooses to hold on. Some people keep replaying old wounds until they become part of their identity. Pain, they don't even realize that they built a home in their hurt. Every time they think about it, they relive it. Every time they see that person, they feel it again. Pain, that's the trap of unforgiveness. It keeps you emotionally stuck in a moment that's already over. You can't move forward while facing backward. Pain, you can't live freely while chained to yesterday's offenses. Pain, enemy loves unforgiveness because it contaminates everything good that God is trying to produce in your life. When you hold on to resentment, your prayers feel heavy. Pain, your peace feels distant and your joy feels incomplete. Unforgiveness is not just emotional, it's spiritual. It blocks the flow of blessings because it contradicts the very nature of grace. God forgave you when you didn't deserve it. Pain, how can you receive mercy freely but refuse to extend it? Forgiveness is not about fairness, it's about freedom. Fairness says they should suffer like you did. Pain. Freedom says you're done suffering altogether. Many people misunderstand forgiveness. Pain. They think it means pretending nothing happened or allowing someone to keep hurting them. That's not forgiveness. That's foolishness. Pain. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means release. It doesn't mean you invite them back into your life. It means you remove them from your heart's courtroom. You stop letting them rent space in your spirit. You stop rehearsing the pain and start reclaiming your peace. It's not about forgetting pain. It's about refusing to let what happened define who you are. Think about Joseph. His brothers betrayed him, threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, and abandoned him. Pain. Years later, when he rose to power, he could have taken revenge. But he didn't. Instead, he forgave them. Why? Because Joseph understood that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's wisdom. He said, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." That's the revelation that sets you free. Pain. When you truly trust that God can turn every pain into purpose, every betrayal into blessing, you no longer need to hold grudges. Pain. You realize that what others used to break you, God used to build you. Holding on to unforgiveness doesn't hurt the offender, it hurts you. It seeps into your conversations, your relationships, even your health. Bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Every time you talk about what they did, you reopen the wound. Pain. Every time you replay the memory, you reinforce your misery. You can't heal from what you keep rehearsing. Forgiveness is the decision to stop being the victim in your own story. It's choosing peace over punishment, purpose over pain. But forgiveness is not a one-time act. Pain, it's a process. Sometimes you have to forgive the same multiple times until it loses its grip. The emotions might not disappear immediately, but every time you choose to release, you weaken the power of resentment. Forgiveness is not based on feelings. It's based on faith. Pain. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace. Pain. You forgive because you understand that can't fill a heart that's already full of hatred. When Jesus was on the cross, bleeding and broken, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." If anyone had the right to hold a grudge, it was him. But he chose forgiveness. Why? Pain. Because forgiveness is the language of freedom. It breaks the curse of pain and unlocks the blessing of peace. When you forgive pain, you're not saying that what happened was right. You're saying it no longer has the right to control you. There are people who have carried anger for years, at parents who abandoned them, friends who betrayed them, partners who lied, leaders who failed. But what they don't realize is that the longer they carry it, the heavier it becomes. Unforgiveness doesn't stay contained, it spreads. It affects your mood, pain, motivation, even your ability to love. Some people can't fully give or receive love because they built emotional walls to protect themselves. Pain. But walls don't just keep pain out, they keep joy out too. The heart that refuses to forgive is the heart that struggles to feel alive. Pain. Forgiveness doesn't mean you let them win, it means you win. Because when you forgive, you break the chain that keeps you tied to what happened. You take your power back. You say, "You no longer have the authority to dictate my emotions, my peace, or my future." That's liberation. And when you forgive pain, you open yourself up for God to bring restoration. He can't restore what you refuse to release. You may say, "Pain, but they never apologized." Forgiveness doesn't require their apology. It requires your decision. Pain. You don't wait for closure from them. You create closure within yourself. You don't wait for them to make it right. You trust God to make it right. Pain. Because God's justice is better than your revenge. The moment you forgive, you free yourself from carrying a burden that was never yours to carry. Pain. You let God handle what only He can handle. Forgiveness also means forgiving yourself. Many people have let go of others but still live in shame for their own mistakes. And they replay what they should have done differently, punishing themselves for being human. But self-forgiveness is essential for healing. Pain. You can't walk in your purpose while constantly condemning yourself for your past. If God has forgiven you, who are you to hold yourself hostage? Grace means you don't have to be perfect to be purposeful. The same mercy that covers others covers you too. The truth is, unforgiveness and breakthrough cannot coexist. Pain. You can't ask God a new thing in your life while your heart is filled with old resentment. God can't pour fresh oil into a bitter vessel. Pain. Your next level requires a clean heart and clear spirit. Forgiveness wipes the slate clean, allowing divine favor to flow again. It's not easy, it's supernatural. Pain. You'll know you've forgiven when you can think about that person or that event without feeling the sting of pain. You may remember, but it no longer defines you. Pain. So delete unforgiveness today. Not tomorrow, not when they apologize. For us, not when it feels fair.
it out.
Speak it our own freedom. Speak it out loud. I release them. I forgive them. I refuse to carry this any longer. And every time the memory comes back, remind yourself, I've already released that. You'll feel lighter. Paying, you'll think clearer. You'll live freer. Because when you forgive, you unlock your future. And forgiveness doesn't change what happened. It changes you. It transforms bitterness into peace, wounds into wisdom, and pain into purpose. Paying, your breakthrough's waiting on the other side of forgiveness. When you let go of the offense, God releases the overflow. When you free others, you free yourself. Paying, the weight you've been carrying wasn't yours to hold. It was yours to hand over. Let it go, and watch God replace your pain with peace, your sorrow with strength, pain, and your scars with success. Because forgiveness isn't just about letting go of others. It's about stepping into the freedom you were always meant to live in. Paying. The victim mentality is one of the most deceptive a person can live in because it convinces you that freedom is impossible while making you believe you're powerless. It whispers that life is unfair, that people are against you, that your pain defines your potential. But as long as you see yourself as a victim, paying, you'll never walk as a victor. You can't move forward if you keep rehearsing what happened instead of releasing what's ahead. What you focus on grows, pain. And if you keep focusing on pain, you'll keep producing more of it. The moment you stop identifying your wounds and start identifying with your worth, pain transformation begins. The victim mentality tells you it's not your fault, paying, so it's not your responsibility. And that's the trap. Because while it's true that you didn't cause every wound, it's still your responsibility to heal from it. Paying, healing is your choice, not your offender's duty. If you wait for an apology before you move forward, you've surrendered your destiny to the very thing that broke you. Paying, freedom begins when you decide what happened to you will not define you. You are not what you went through. You are what you decide to become after it. Paying, people with a victim mindset tend to magnify their struggles while minimizing their strength. They see every challenge as confirmation that life is unfair, rather than as preparation for greatness. But if you look at every story of transformation in the Bible, it began with pain. Joseph was betrayed. David was hunted. Job was sent. Paul was in prison. Yet none of them stayed victims because they understood that pain is not punishment, it's preparation. The victim says, prime me. The victor says, try. One perspective keeps you stuck, the other makes you strong. The danger of the victim mindset is that it becomes an identity. Paying, you start to introduce yourself by your wounds. You wear your story like a badge of honor, not realizing it's become your limitation. You start expecting sympathy instead of breakthrough. You start waiting for rescue instead of walking in responsibility. But here one is coming to save you. Pain, because God already gave you the power to rise. The same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives inside you. You have resurrection power in you. Pain, and yet some still live like they're buried under their past. You don't need permission to rise, you need the decision to rise. Pain thinking doesn't just paralyze progress, it repels opportunity. When you see yourself as powerless, pain, you subconsciously push away the very door it is trying to open. You say things like, pain, that's not for me. I can never do that. People like me don't get chances like that. You speak defeat before you even begin. And since your words shape your world, life keeps giving you what you confess. But when you shift from victim to victor, your language changes. You start saying, pain, if God is for me, who can be against me? You start believing that every obstacle is an opportunity for elevation. If the same situation that used to discourage you now develops you. The victim mindset also thrives on blame. It loves to point fingers at parents, bosses, governments, circumstances, even God. But blame is just a disguise for bondage. Every time you blame, you give away your power. Paying, you hand control of your destiny to the thing you're blaming. When you stop blaming, you start building. You start realizing that maybe it wasn't fair, but it's still fixable. Maybe it hurt, but it can still heal. Maybe you fell, but you can still rise. Taking responsibility doesn't mean it was your fault. It means you've chosen to take your power back. Victimhood also breeds entitlement. You start expecting compensation for your pain instead of growth through your process. And you start saying, the world owes me. But the truth is, life doesn't owe you anything. It's what you become through life that makes the difference. Paying, God doesn't reward bitterness, He rewards faithfulness. He doesn't promote pity, He promotes perseverance. When you stop demanding pity and start demonstrating purpose, pain, doors begin to open that were once locked. The heavens don't respond to complaints, they respond to conviction. And make no mistake, pain, the victim mindset can even disguise itself as humility. You say, I'm just being real. Pain, I'm just being honest about my situation. But there's a difference between honesty and hopelessness. Honesty says, this is where I am. Hopelessness says, pain, this is where I'll always be. You're not being humble when you speak defeat over your life. You're being disobedient to the truth God already declared. Pain. Humility is acknowledging your weakness while still walking in His strength. It's saying, Wes, I've been hurt, but I'm still here. I've been knocked down, pain, but I'm not staying down. The devil loves when you think like a victim because it keeps you praying for rescue instead of walking in authority. But Jesus didn't die so you could survive. He died so you could reign. He said, I have given you power to tread on serpents and scorpions. Power to overcome, not power to complete, not to create, not power to quit. Power to speak life even in the middle of loss. The victim asks for the storm to stop. Pain, the victor learns to walk on the water. When you stop seeing yourself as a victim, you begin to see pain differently. You start to realize that every attack carried a lesson. Pain, every delay built discipline, and every disappointment was divine redirection. You begin to thank God not only for the blessings, but also for the battles, and because they refined you. The victim says, I wish it never happened. The victor says, I'm glad it did, because it made me stronger. You start walking with power instead of pity. You stop needing validation and start walking in revelation. And you stop asking for sympathy and start inspiring others with your story. But here's the key. Shifting from victim to victor starts in your mind. Pain, you can't experience a new life with an old mindset. You have to delete every thought that says, I can't, I won't, it's too late, it's too hard. Those are the words of defeat. Replace them with declarations of dominion. Pain, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. I am more than a conqueror. You don't have to feel powerful to speak powerful. Your words will catch up to your faith. Pain, you can't wait to get easier to become stronger. Strength is developed in struggle. If everything came easy, you'd never grow. The victim avoids pressure. The victor embraces it. Pressure produces power. Pain produces purpose. Every tear you've cried, every hardship you've faced, pain has been training ground for your breakthrough. Stop resenting your past. It prepared you for your promise. Pain. Stop replaying what broke you. Start rejoicing over what built you. You have to decide today that you're done being the victim in your own story. Pain, you've survived too much, keep living small. The fact that you're still breathing means God still has a plan. You're not meant to live in pity. Pain, you're meant to walk in power. Delete every trace of the victim mentality. Pain, stop telling the story from the standpoint of pain and start telling it from the standpoint of victory. You didn't just go through it. You grew through it. Pain, you're not the same person you were when it happened, and that's the proof of transformation. When you finally shift your perspective, pain, you'll see that what tried to bury you actually planted you. You'll realize that what you thought was the end was really the beginning of something greater. Pain. And when you rise from that place, people once pitied you will look at you in awe because they'll see a survivor turned conqueror, a wounded soul turned warrior, pain, a victim turned victor. That's what grace does. That's what growth looks like. Your breakthrough depends on deleting that victim mindset. Pain, because as long as you stay in victim mode, you block vision, you block responsibility, and you block results. But when you rise as a victor, pain, everything changes. Your posture, your power, your peace. You stop reacting to life and start creating it. You stop waiting for help and start walking in hope. Pain. The world doesn't need a victim story, it needs another victor's testimony. So stand up, shake off the ashes, and declare with faith, I'm not a victim. Pain, I am victorious. And when you say it long enough, your spirit will believe it, and your life will prove it. Pain, the final thing you must delete, the last barrier standing between you and your breakthrough, is key to disobedience to divine instruction. Pain. Disobedience is the silent destroyer of destiny, doesn't always come in the form of rebellion. Sometimes it's hesitation, delay, or partial obedience. And sometimes it's you saying, I'll do it later, or I'll do it my way. But delayed obedience is still disobedience, and partial obedience is still rebellion. Pain. You can't walk in full blessing on partial obedience. God doesn't bless confusion or compromise. He blesses alignment. See, God doesn't speak to be heard. Pain, He speaks to be obeyed. Every divine instruction is a seed designed to produce a supernatural harvest. But when you ignore the instruction, you cancel the harvest. Many people keep asking God for miracles while ignoring His methods. They want breakthrough, but they don't want obedience. They want promotion. Pain, they don't want submission. They want overflow, but they don't want order. But the truth is, so God will not bless you beyond your level of obedience. Pain, think about it. Every major turning point in Scripture began with an instruction. Noah was told to build an ark before it ever rained. Pain, Abraham was told to leave his country before he knew where he was going. Moses was told to stretch his rod before the Red Sea parted. Pain, the widow was told to pour oil into empty vessels before the miracle overflowed. Peter was told to cast his net on the other side before the fish came. Pain, the instruction always precedes the miracle. If you delete disobedience, you'll see that your next brew isn't waiting on God. It's waiting on your obedience. Pain, the reason obedience feels difficult is because it requires trust. It demands that you act before you understand. God's instructions often don't make sense in the moment. Pain, that's because he's not trying to fit into your logic. He's trying to stretch your faith. When he says forgive, your flesh says, thee don't deserve it. When he's give, your fear says, what if I lose? When he says go, your insecurity says, what if I fail? But faith says, if God said it, that settles it. Faith moves without full details. Faith obeys without full explanation. Pain, some people are not suffering from lack of resources. They're suffering from lack of obedience. They've heard what to do but haven't done it. Pain, they've received a word but haven't responded. They've prayed for clarity when God already gave them a command. Pain, you don't need another confirmation when you already have instruction. Every day you delay obedience, you delay your destiny. Every time you postpone the step, pain, you postpone the blessing. The door that's supposed to open stays locked until you move in faith. Disobedience is subtle. Pain, sometimes it's not loud rebellion, it's quiet resistance. It's you saying yes with your mouth but with your actions. Pain, it's you showing up to church but refusing to forgive. It's you praising God in public but doubting him in private. It's when your behavior contradicts your belief. But real obedience isn't what you do when it's easy, it's what you do when it costs you. When Abram lifted the knife to sacrifice Isaac, pain, it wasn't about losing his son, it was about proving his surrender. True obedience requires you to lay something down. A God tests obedience not to break you but to bless you. He tests you to see if you trust him enough to obey him when it doesn't make sense. Because some people want the blessing of Abraham but not the faith of Abraham. They want the favor of David but not the obedience of David. Pain, they want the promotion of Joseph but not the process of Joseph. You can't copy their result without copying their obedience. The oil only flows where obedience is present. There's a reason obedience and faith walk hand in hand. Faith without obedience is just empty talk. You can say, I trust God, but if you don't move when he says move, pain, that's not faith, that's fear in disguise. True faith doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect. It moves because the command is clear. Pain, when Peter stepped out of the boat, he didn't wait for the storm to calm down. The water didn't become solid until his foot touched it. Pain, the miracle manifested only when he moved. That's what obedience does. It activates the supernatural. Disobedience, on the other hand, invites delay. Pain, it keeps you wandering in circles, just like the Israelites. God delivered them from Egypt in one night. Pain, but took 40 years to enter the promised land, not because God was slow, but because they were stubborn. They kept complaining, doubting, rebelling, pain, refusing to trust. They wanted the promise without the process. They wanted the blessing without the burden of obedience. Pain, and that's how many people live today, circling the same mountain of frustration, wondering why things haven't changed, when the truth is, they haven't changed their obedience. You can't expect new results with old rebellion. Every time you disobey, you delay destiny. Every time you resist instruction, pain, you resist increase. God can't take you to the next level if you refuse to leave the last level. Pain, obedience is the bridge between where you are and where God is trying to take you. It's not punishment, it's positioning. It's God aligning you with his promise. Pain, but as long as you hold on to disobedience, you're choosing comfort over calling and safety over significance. Sometimes obedience means letting go of something familiar. Pain, God may tell you to end a relationship that's holding you back, to leave a job that's draining your purpose, or to walk away from a habit that's blocking your blessing. Pain, when he does, it's not to punish you, it's to promote you. Every time God says no, it's because there's a bigger West waiting. Pain, but you can't receive what's new. Hands are still holding what's old. Obedience often requires empty hands. Obedience is also connected to stewardship. Pain, how you handle the small things determines how God trusts you with greater things. If you can't obey him in private, you can't represent him in public. Pain, if you won't follow the whisper, you can't handle the wind. The Bible says, pain, he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. You can't pray for more until you obey what you already have. Some people keep asking for abundance, but they're mismanaging the assignment. God doesn't reward prayer alone. He rewards obedience attached to prayer. Disobedience is costly. It costs peace. It costs progress, power. Think about Jonah. He ran from God's instruction and ended up in a storm, then in a fish. One act of disobedience created chaos, pain, not for him but everyone on the ship. Your disobedience doesn't just affect you. It affects everyone connected to you. When you don't obey, pain. Your family feels it, your finances feel it, your purpose feels it. But when you obey, blessings overflow into every area of your life. Obedience isn't just for you. Pain is for generations after you. Your children will walk in freedom because you chose obedience over fear. When you delete disobedience, you delete confusion. Pain, you start hearing God clearly. The reason many can't discern His voice is because obedience is the volume knob of revelation. The more you obey, pain, the louder His voice becomes. God doesn't reveal more to those who ignore what He's already said. Revelation follows obedience. If you want God to show you the next step, obey the last one. You can't unlock step 2 if you've ignored step 1. And here's something powerful: obedience produces confidence. When you live in alignment with God's will, you walk with a holy boldness. You don't fear the outcome because you trust the author. You stop stressing over results because you know obedience guarantees success. Not worldly success, but divine success. Obedience gives you peace even when life doesn't make sense because you know you're walking where He called you to walk. Some people confuse obedience with control. They think if they obey, they'll lose control. But the truth is when you obey, you're surrendering control to the one who sees the end from the beginning. God's instructions aren't meant to limit you, they're meant to liberate you. He doesn't ask for obedience to restrict your joy. He asks for it to protect your destiny. Every don't in the Bible is a divine safeguard. Every do is a divine invitation. When God tells you to forgive, it's not to make you weak, it's to make you free. When He tells you to give, it's not to make you poor, it's to make you a conduit of blessing. Obedience often looks like sacrifice, but in the end it produces multiplication. Jesus obeyed unto death, and through that obedience came resurrection, redemption, and glory. When you obey, you align yourself with that same resurrection power. What looks like loss in the moment becomes gain in eternity. What feels like letting go turns into divine overflow. You can't outgive God, and you can't out-obey His plan. If you're waiting for your next breakthrough, ask yourself, what's the last thing God told me to do that I haven't done yet? Because that's usually where your breakthrough is buried. In the place of obedience. Maybe it's forgiving someone, maybe it's starting something. Maybe it's sowing something, maybe it's leaving something. Whatever it is, do it now. Stop praying for new doors while ignoring the keys God already gave you. Pain and disobedience doesn't just block blessings, it blinds you to opportunities. It causes spiritual stagnation. But the moment you choose obedience, things start moving. Heaven responds. The same God who told Peter to cast his net on the other side is telling you, try again, but this time do it my way. And when you obey His way, you'll get results that hard work alone could never produce. Obedience is not a one-time event, it's a lifestyle. It's daily surrender. It's saying, not my will, but yours be done. It's waking up every day and asking, Lord, what do you require me today? It's training your heart to move when He moves and stop when He says stop. The more you practice obedience, the more natural it becomes. And soon, you'll realize that obedience doesn't drain you. It directs you. It doesn't limit your freedom. It defines it. And your breakthrough depends on deleting disobedience, because as a master key to acceleration, it doesn't just open one door. It opens a series of divine doors. When you walk in obedience, you align heaven's favor with your footsteps. You stop striving and start thriving. You stop guessing and start growing. You stop chasing and start attracting. That's the power of alignment. Things start flowing because you're finally in position. So, if you want your breakthrough, delete disobedience, delete hesitation, delete procrastination, delete every excuse that keeps you from doing what God already said. Obey even when it's inconvenient. Obey even when it's unpopular. Obey even when you don't understand. Because obedience today builds momentum for miracles tomorrow. God is not waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to be obedient. Your obedience is the seed of your next season. Your yes today creates your breakthrough tomorrow. Don't negotiate with what God already commanded. Don't argue with your assignment. Don't delay your destiny. Obey. Because when you obey, you unlock a level of blessing, peace, and purpose that disobedience could never deliver. You start walking with divine acceleration, supernatural favor, and unstoppable strength. Heaven moves on behalf of the obedient. The angels respond, doors open, provision flows, and breakthroughs become natural. Delete disobedience, because your breakthroughs doesn't depend on how much you pray, how loud you worship, or how hard you work. Pain. Your breakthrough depends on how quickly you obey. When obedience becomes your lifestyle, breakthrough becomes your normal. Pain, that's when you'll step into the life God always intended. Not a life of resistance, but a life of revelation, restoration, and unstoppable power.